So I connected up the 300 watts of solar again, and with 108, 107 amps, and with 1200 watts, and we're 11.15 volts. Okay, and the element on the stove, I can hear the element click on and off. Did you just hear it? It went click off, back on. So the stove is what's throttling the Kodiak, and we're at the 107 amps in 11.15 volts, 11.12 volts. Now, one more thing to notice: when we were just on solar, we were down to one green light, and now we're up to 2 green lights. So that's and it's definitely the stove that's throttling back. It's throttling the elements from getting too hot. I guess the stove itself has to protect the element so it just doesn't burn the element. And right now I have it set for 5, and right now maximum heat. If the water starts boiling ferociously, then I'm going to have to come back here and lower that to a lower setting, to more acceptable setting. Okay, so I'm going to let the Kodiak just cook my meal. You know, it's on 2 green lights, and we'll see how it does when the meal is done. The water is beginning to boil ferociously, so I'm gonna throttle it down to 1. I just need to maintain the heat. I don't need it to go out of control. So I move it down to 1. And the Kodiak is slowly losing ground. I mean, it's gonna have to wait for a while. I'll throttle it back up so I can talk, then I'll put it. So the Kodiak is at 1,200 watts for all practical purposes, but it's drawing 112, 113 amps, and the voltage is down to 10.81. So I lowered it down to 1, and it's gonna go. One more, and notice the light is down to 1 green. So it's 110 amps. It's more than it's getting from the solar, so it has to be taking it from the battery. And now that I throttled the back temperature, because I don't want it to boil more ferociously than it is here, you know. So it's set to 1. I may even have to make it lower than 1. I don't know. It's the first time that I'm ever using this stove for actually cooking. I had a different stove, but it's the first time I'm using the stove, and I got to learn how it works. So while the element of the stove is cooling down, the Kodiak is getting the solar energy and the inverter plus the fan that's running here, they are using 1.7 watts and 1.46 amps, and we're in 3 lights. So we'll just let the soup keep going on and see what happened. I throttled it back to 2, and the element of the stove keeps turning it on and off very quickly, keeping the temperature of the element in. But if you look, I have plenty of boiling, so it's not like it's boiling. And I compromised on a setting of 2, and here it is. It just went on and just went off. I mean, I can hear the stove clicking on and off, and the Kodiak is just having no problem with it because it turned off the fan. The fan isn't running. You should be hearing it, but the fan is off. And in the unloaded, it's 3 lights. Loaded, it's down to 1 light. And the stove is not asking for much power. I mean, they coexist beautifully. The Kodiak is not being taxed by the demand of the stove. The fan went off, and it's supplying 110 amps. That's a lot of power. And it's in violation of the 1000 watts of the AC receptacle. But the characteristic of the Kodiak, it's not having any trouble. It's not even viewing itself hot anymore. The fence is off. So it's saying, okay, give me a little pain, I can take it. Give me a little pain, I can take it. And the stove gives it a little pain, and the Kodiak just smiles at it and does what the stove needs. So it's coming along. Look at that. It's actually beginning it's beginning to be able to actually keep up with the 300 watts solar. Look at that, four lights. It's charging up to 4 lights. So the 300 watts is and this one is beginning to light up a little. Now it just went out. So it's kind of fluctuating. I mean, 111 amps is 111 amps, and anyway you look at it, that's a lot of power being drawn by it. But see that 4 lights in the unloaded state, not 3 lights. Now it's loaded again, it's down to 1 light. And it's the stove that's clicking on and off. I can hear the stove clicking on the element. So the element heats up, the element lets go, and the Kodiak is having no problem at all keeping up with the stove. I'm going to keep making soup. I'm about to turn off the soup. It's under load. It's 10.93. It went off load. So it's on 4 lights. It's 11.73, 1.5 amp, 13 watts. That's what it's steady state of it, not under demand. Now it's under demand again. So it's a 1. I'm gonna move it up to 5 so I can talk. Okay, so it's taking 112 amps. It's roughly 1,200 watts, and it's down to 10.8 and 1 light, 1 green light. That's it under load. And the soup's beginning to cook ferocious, so I'm going to turn it off again. And it's off. And I could turn off the inverter because I don't need it anymore. And the inverter's off, so the battery is sitting at 11.79 volts. That's what the battery is, with being charged by the solar panels, 11.8 volts. So very pleased with this whole thing. I'm gonna disconnect, and you can still see that it's boiling ferociously. So I'm just gonna let this sit there, do its thing with the heat of the coil. Disconnect it from the Kodiak. And I don't know, maybe in an hour or two I'll let it kind of stew and develop the flavor. Because it's gonna cook for a while. I mean, I'm just gonna let it sit there and do its thing. Now it's about 2 hours since I stopped cooking the meal, and the voltage is up to 12.51, which I think by the end of today it will be fully charged. And this is the meal I have. I have cabbage from today's meal. I have onions from today's meal. I have greens from today's meal. I have carrots and rice from yesterday's meal, and some cucumbers to go with it. So that's the meal.